Bismillah. In the next chapter here, Sheikh Al-Ba'li rahimahullah ta'ala, he continues discussing the Friday prayer. In this particular chapter, he discusses two main points. The first of those is the location in which the Friday prayer is prayed, as well as some recommended acts for Friday itself. So he begins this chapter and he says the Friday prayer is 2 rak'ahs, and this is unanimously agreed upon by the Ummah. Performing it, however, there are a number of issues here where it's performed. Performing it and Eid, both those two prayers, in more than one place in the city is impermissible, as he mentions in the book. So basically, here talking about not how the prayer is performed, but where. So here you can get an idea the intricate nature of the Sharia. Discusses not only the how, but the where, the when, the why. All of the details are addressed. And in this particular book, we're talking about the locality. So here it's impermissible to hold multiple congregations in one particular locality. So essentially, as discussed in previous chapters, we're talking about establishing the Jummah prayer in a town, a township, a city, suburbs, some type of inhabited region where the people have congregated together and their population has reached the minimum to require a Jummah prayer, which is 40 free Muslim male men. And of course, the conditions of those were mentioned in previous chapters. So once we've reached that number, that means we have a sustainable population to hold the Jummah prayer. Now imagine if we had that population or more, and then we started to open up more congregational masajid, or al-masjid al-jami', the Friday masajid. We're going to break up the congregation into smaller congregations, right? When the idea for Salat al-Jum'ah is a great gathering, and Salat al-Eid is a great gathering. Well, all of the community, they come together and they pray and they listen to counsel and admonishment together, and they celebrate their basic holidays, both Friday and Eid. So it has been declared impermissible to hold multiple congregations in one place in the city, unless, of course, there is a necessity. There's always exceptions to these rules, especially when there is a need for exception. Exceptions can be a lack of space. If you have a mosque, it's simply not big enough to hold the size of the community, then it's permissible to hold the Jummah prayer in another location, perhaps even building a second mosque or third. Remoteness, if the city is very large and the location of the mosque is remote for many people, it's just too far away, it's very inconvenient to attend, then it may be permissible to hold a second congregation in another location. Or if there's some fear of tribulation, perhaps some political turmoil, some social unrest due to having one mosque, perhaps the community is at odds with each other, or something of that nature. Those types of excuses, which would be considered necessary to hold a second congregation in a different location, then of course it is perfectly permissible to do so. If the need ceases, meaning the need to hold a second congregation somewhere else, if it ceases and it's no longer present, then we go back to the baseline ruling, which is holding one congregation in one city, one place in the city. Now, if we have opened up multiple congregations or Friday locations, which one would be valid in this case? So he addresses that here. He says the valid prayer is the one attended or permitted by the ruler. So essentially, if you're living in a society which is governed, the religious affairs are governed by the authorities, then this can be an easy answer. Whatever was approved of by the state, then this is the official congregational mosque, the official congregational prayer for Salat al-Jum'ah or Salat al-Eid. Or they are in attendance, which shows their approval for that. If you don't know, which is basically if you're not living in such a society, You move on to the next part. He says if the prayers are equal in their permission, so either they've been granted permission by the authorities, so all of them are good. Perhaps they're not implementing this particular rule. Well, maybe they don't care to, or they're being lax here, or lack thereof, meaning you don't have permission, it's not known, or whatever. The first to perform ihram for the prayer is valid. So basically, the first one that goes is the valid prayer for Salat al-Jum'ah or Salat al-Eid. If how it occurred is unknown, they pray it as dhuhr. So if they're unable to determine how it occurred, the prayer, which one started first, which one's been granted permission, etc., and the prayer time would run out, then they should certainly pray Salat al-Dhuhr, as Salat al-Dhuhr is a replacement for Salat al-Jum'ah and not the other way around. Some other things that should be done, recommended acts, he transitions here. First and foremost, it should be noted that the Salat al-Jum'ah, it does not have a sunnah ratiba before it, a highly stressed and recommended prayer. It is preferred, however, that a person pray at least arba'ah, that they pray arba raka'at, 4 units of prayer before Salat al-Jum'ah. After Salat al-Jum'ah, it is a sunnah to pray. The least amount would be 2 rak'ahs, and the most would be 6. So a person could begin their Salat al-Jum'ah basically before it begins by praying 4 units of prayer, and then after it concludes, they can pray a minimum of 2 and a maximum of 6 as recommended prayers. It's also preferred on the day of Jum'ah to recite Surah Al-Kahf, which is the chapter entitled The Cave. This can be done in the day, and it can also be done in the night of Friday, as we know is before the day. So this is one of the preferred acts. It's also preferred, as mentioned by a Shaykh rahimahullah, to make abundant supplication or dua on Friday. We know that there is a time on Friday in which the supplication is answered, and so we should do our best to take advantage of that time. When it is, the scholars have differed greatly as to the exact time. Al-Imam al-Ba'li rahimahullah, he says, indicating this in his explanation of this text, that the most virtuous of times is after Salat al-Asr. After that, of course, is sending salutations, abundant salutations of prayers and peace upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is recommended throughout the day. And then he concludes with the entrance of the masjid late. So if a person, for example, were to come into the mosque while the imam was giving the khutbah, basically you were late. Perhaps you have a legitimate excuse, you were held up, traffic jam, got pulled over, car broke down, anything like that, or you were simply just unable to get there on time, then you should pray rak'atain, 2 units of prayer before sitting, even if the imam is giving the khutbah, and even if it is during the prohibited time. And that would basically mean when the sun was at its height, when it's at the zenith. We know that's one of the prohibited times. So even if you came in, the imam was giving the khutbah at the prohibited time, you should perform 2 units of prayer before you sit.